Hi everybody, this is Kimberly from Starfish Design Embroidery Group. I'm here tonight to stitch out the lined key fob hipster phone case. I've gone ahead and already stitched out the placement for the zipper. I'm going to go ahead and put the zipper down. And those of you who have followed any of my other patterns know that I use a middle zipper placement line, and that helps you to line up your zipper in case your particular zipper is a little bit more wide or more narrow. I am using these zippers because I have a 6-needle machine and it'll go through this resin okay, but you may not be able to do that on your machine. So if instead of risking breaking a needle, I recommend you test on a scrap first and see how powerful your machine is. I know I would not be able to stitch this down on my my single needle Janome or Brother. So what I'm doing is I'm going to make sure this zipper is lined up in the middle, and if you pull it up, you should see that your zipper teeth should be right in the middle of that placement line in the event that your zipper is more wide or more narrow. This particular zipper is actually just a smidge wider than my placement, so it's a smidge wider than 1 inch. So I am making use of that line, and I am going to tape this down, and I'm going to check it on the other side too and make sure that it's still even, because I do not want my zipper to be wonky. There's nothing worse than a wonky zipper. So I'm going to go make sure here it's lined up even. Yep. And then I'm going to run the next step, which is actually just a base down of the zipper to the stabilizer. I'm going to put a piece of tape on this metal to make sure it's out of the way. One thing you have to keep in mind is not just how much clearance you need for the zipper teeth, but on the clearance on your hardware as well, because your presser foot needs to be able to clear that. So on this 6-needle machine, the presser foot is kind of narrow, so I don't have any problem. But on a regular machine, some of the presser feet are really that big, and so when you're trying to go past it, it's going to stitch right here. You want to make sure it's going to get past that and not stuck. And you can see right there, I think, the crosshairs, that this one would get stuck. It might just flex right over it and you'd be okay, but it's just one of those things that you need to keep in mind when you're working on an in-the-hoop project. So in that case, what I would do, if I was using a machine that the presser foot is too close, I would use a zipper that's even longer, at least 2 inches longer. Now this may go through the tape, and that's fine. I'm going to pull the tape right up, and this tape usually pulls up pretty easily. And I'm going to bring my instructions up and follow along, because sometimes I forget to do that, and I miss a step, and I don't tell you, because I've done it so many times now that it's in my brain. I don't have to think about it anymore. And this is a time you can kind of, if you need to, get a ruler out and make sure that your zipper looks good. This is the time for it. For the most part, I say the most part because I'm finding this software is not as, how do I say this without saying the software sucks? It's not as detailed, or it's not as good at getting the measurements exactly right every time. But if you can see there, I've gone ahead and my measurement from here to here is pretty, I can eyeball it. It's pretty even. But if for some reason this line was all the way over here because you got your zipper done, stop, undo it, and redo that step, because this is the basis for the entire bag. Okay, now we've got the placement down, so now we're going to go ahead and flip the bag over and put our lining fabric down. First, we're going to use our bottom lining, which is the 5. I cut my pieces for the large bag, but I'm doing this small. Okay, so 5.5 by 7.5, I believe, but you're going to go ahead and look at your instructions. So we want our lining, the bottom part is going to end up right here. right? So in order for that to happen, we need to put it face down and line it up with the bottom of the zipper. And then we're going to tape this down really well. So you can do it with that placement, original placement stitch, or even the tack down stitch is fine. The original placement stitch is going to give you a little bit less than a 1/2 inch seam allowance. The tack down stitch would be about a 1/4 inch. I'm going to line this here so I cover up the corners. And my son may be coming up here to tell me goodnight in a few minutes. I really needed to get this pattern done. I've been sick and I got sidetracked doing some dragon hair slides today. So I've had this one in the queue for a while and I want to get it done. My testers have worked really hard to get it tested for me. There you go. So the fabric is pretty side down. Carefully turn this over. And now we're going to take our exterior bottom. I'm using cotton. So I have gone ahead and interfaced it with SF101. I'm going to go ahead and fold this lightly in half so I can make sure it's folded. I line it up right because it's directional, since I chose a directional print. And I'm going to guesstimate, I don't want to cut off my little tail there. So I don't have a center line here. I should have done that. Let me find a ruler right quick. You don't need to worry about this if yours is not directional, but because I made mine directional, I need to make sure I center it. So if you do that, just like me, go ahead and get yourself a ruler and center it. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4. I know you can't see this. 4 1/4. I'm not going to hold this up. It's going to tear my stabilizer. So I'm going to go in 2 1/8 and mark my center there. Again, this is only needed because I chose a directional print. So there's my center. Okay, I marked my little halfway crease on here and I'm going to line that up there. And I'm going to tape this down. And if you're using vinyl, I find the vinyl is usually pretty heavy and you don't have to tape it down as much. But this is cotton and it's going to fly away as soon as the needle goes into it. So I'm definitely taping it down. And this is a tulip pink. I'm very drawn to her materials, her fabrics. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and make sure our bottom doesn't come undone. Slide this back in here and we're going to run our next step. And remember, the colors on the steps are just to make the machine stop and take action. You're going to match your colors to whatever it is you're doing. So this is going to be step 3. And I'm just going to use white. Because this step won't show through. I have a pretty magenta purplish pink up here to do my top stitching. I hope it works. My friend gave it to me. She's downsizing and I inherited all of her Isacord. So now here's something important to note. If you wanted to put some embroidery on here now, go ahead and actually not this step, the next step I'll show you what to do. So I'm going to finger crease this against a hard surface, and I actually have my table on here, so that's a hard surface. So could you guys see that? Let me try and make this go down a little bit. Kind of moved on me. So finger crease it here. We're going to turn it over, and we're going to do the same thing on the back. Now I'm using Pellon 360. I like using this for bags because sometimes part of the stabilizer gets stuck inside the bag, and this is a soft stabilizer. So again, I'm just running my finger along here and finger creasing it. And I'm going to go ahead and put the tape down on the corners, and on these, on the back, I find that these corners here like to pucker up. So I like to go ahead and put extra tape on the corners of the seam. Okay. Oh, this one came loose. Let's put him back down there. Because we want our top stitch to be even. Okay, now I'll put this guy back on here. Make sure nothing came loose. And I'm going to top stitch. Hopefully it won't break because it broke once. So this is actually going to top stitch, and it's going to come back up here so that it doesn't interact with any of the zipper. I have a few of those carrying lines, traveling lines to do that. So this was step 4. So now, this is the point. If you wanted to put custom embroidery on it, this is when you would want to do that. And this stitch is outside of the stitch path. It's going to get cut off later, that little travel stitch right there. So don't worry about it. So if you wanted to add custom embroidery, leave this down, but flip this back up because you don't want that embroidery on the back of your hoop. Do your custom embroidery and then flip it back down and move on to the next step. In my case, I'm not doing custom embroidery because the Tula thing is going to speak for itself, and ooh, it's going to be very tight. Oh, I should have measured this better. I think it's going to be very tight. His little face might get cut off. Okay, so now we're going to take, and we're going to put, again, right side down, our top fabric, and this time we're going to make the raw edge line up, and I'm sorry, always do the back first and get it out of your way. Sorry about that. So we're going to take our pretty side down, and we're going to line it up with the top line. And sometimes it helps when you first run the placement stitch. I usually show this, and I forgot to this time, is to go on the back of your hoop and draw the lines to where those pieces are at, or that placement is at. We can pull this up for, well, I'm going to leave that because it's going to get stuck on again. Okay, so here's, make sure it matches, your lining matches. If you cut everything in the same, you want to make sure your lining is even with the bottom piece. Again, the pretty side is going to be down. Like that. I'm trying to do a better job this time. I have to redo an entire video for the double zipper clutch because I wasn't keeping an eye out and I didn't realize I was cutting off the frame a whole bunch of times. Okay, now we're going to take this and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to line it up with the top of the zipper tape. And we're going to tape it down. I need to get stock in this tape company. That's all I got to say. Okay, so now we have that lined up on the top. Got to put it back down. And I'm saying top relative to the design. Your frame may look different than my frame. Okay, now we're going to run step 5, which is a tack down. I switch to white. And again, you're going to use whatever color matches your fabric. You can use the same color all the way through if you find a neutral. When I'm in my quilting days, I like to use, I know the color won't show up for you, but it's a neutral gray, Aurifil 2605. And this is the same situation as the bottom. If you want to add custom embroidery on the top, then go ahead and do the top stitching, turn the frame over, and oops, I got that tape stuck in there. Silly, Kimberly. That's okay, we'll tear that out. Why didn't you guys stop me? We still need that little thing taped down. That's okay. I do this almost all the time. I forget that it's going to get there. Okay, anyway. And I'm going to finger press this. And you want, if you don't finger press this, it's going to get like, okay, it's going to get wobbly gloop. And see, you don't want that. See this? If you don't finger press it against the seam, just as if you were ironing it, see what's going to happen? It's not going to look right. And it's not a bad design on mine. This design has been stitched out in its variation. I think come up to 20 between mine and the tester's 20 times in various sizes. I think I have had actually this one tested more than any of my other designs. Okay, those tapes are going to come loose. I just know it, but we're going to wing it. Okay, this one's going to come off. Again, I'm not going to keep showing you guys that. You know the routine. You're going to finger press it. If your fingers aren't good, get yourself a little pressing stick. They're called a boning tool, or I think there's another word for it. I don't remember what it's called. But Clover makes them. Tape it down because you want this nice and tight. You don't want it so tight that you see the threads, but you want it taut. Okay, and we're going to go ahead and do the top stitching. Again, make sure it's okay underneath there. And this time I'm going to use my pretty fuchsia pink. And again, it's going to go to the top and do that little travel stitch. And I can tell when this actually must have opened up the wrong file. This should have done a basting stitch on this side. When you buy the file, it'll be fixed. And that's what the instructions show you. Okay, I did upload the wrong one, so I don't have my basting stitches on this one. That's a real bummer. Okay, so sorry guys. So you're going to go ahead and this is going to have a basting stitch right here. And then you're going to go ahead and open up your zipper and pull it over here, and then we're going to put a basting stitch there. But my file is missing it. I don't know what I did. But anyway, it's not important for the demonstration. So before I flip my bag, I'm going to add some basting stitches to the zipper for reinforcement on the regular machine. So now we're ready to put on the back front, which would be the back. And I'm using this polka dot. I'm just using scraps. But I want to show you the little hack I have. So if you want to add a slip pocket for the back, I just took a piece of fabric and 5.5 inches wide by 12 inches long. I put SF101 on the exterior side and half of it, and then folded it in half. Because I have a sewing machine, I top stitched it. So I want the SF101 to be facing the outside of the bag. So it's going to face, okay, there's the outside. It's going to face the exterior like this. So this is going to get flipped down like this. So I need the non-SOF SF101 to go face down. So I'm going to take and eyeball it. And I have my ruler handy here, so I can do that. I'm going to measure in, I'm going to do 1.5 inches from the middle of the zipper. So I have my 1.5 inch mark on the middle of the zipper. And I'm going to make sure that my top of my fabric is even with that. Okay, and then you want to make sure that, okay, don't be worried it's facing on the exterior right now. You want to make sure it goes past your original placement stitch. Then you're going to take this exterior and you're going to place it down and make sure, again, that it's covering everything. So these are the travel stitches. So just peek up here and make sure that it's long. I tried to make the cutting instructions such that there's an extra 1.5 inches, inch to 1.5 inches, I should say. So this is going to zip all the way around, and then it's going to come back up and stop at the top. I'm going to do this. And we haven't touched the bottom. Bottom's staying the same as it is right now. Okay. And that tape is going to get stuck there. I'm going to smush it Okay, so this time I'm going to use the thread that most closely matches the exterior because it might show. So it's going to stitch all the way around, and then it's going to travel back up to the top because that's where we're going to start when we add our back lining. You hear it kind of struggles going over that resin zipper, so your machine might not be able to make it over there. And then it's doing that travel so it doesn't get stuck on the zipper. And that's in this excess that's going to get cut off. See, if I did not add that travel stitch, what would happen is it would have finished stitching up here and it would have went to try and travel down to here, the next spot, and it would have hung up on your zipper pull here. So I added the travel, so now it's moved the needle over here, and then we're going to start over here. So we're going to go ahead and turn this over, and now we're going to put our back lining. And again, make sure it's covering everything and even. You can go ahead and remove this inside tape now. And then tape this down. I'm going to reuse this same tape. I'm going to attempt to at least. Now this is going to stitch almost all the way around and leave an opening for turning it inside out, aka the birthing hole. I posted that on a message, on a post once, and somebody didn't know what that meant. They laughed about it. But that's what it's been called for as long as I know. Okay, make sure nothing comes loose underneath. And any good vinyl, any thinner vinyl would work for this. I would stay away from the really, really thick vinyls though, because it would be very hard to turn. I'm going to use the same color that matches outside. And it's going to make a few stitches and it's going to back up. So we have a back stitch because we want that reinforced. Again, it's going over that zipper. Okay, that's the last stitch. There's one more stitch remaining in your stitch path, but you are not going to stitch that. That stitch is simply to prevent your presser foot from going back into the center of the machine and getting hung up on any hardware. Okay, so I remove the tape from the back, remove the tape from the front, and you can see I actually have quite a bit of excess fabric here. I really probably should have cut that down by 1 inch. But some people are not as good about measuring, and I found that when I had it a little bit more specific, they didn't do as well. So if you're watching this video and you're buying the pattern, know that you can probably cut that top down by 1 inch. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and tear away all this stabilizer. And this stuff tears away usually pretty good. I don't know what I'm stuck on over here. So, I mean, this is kind of boring. You guys know how to do this. I'm going to go ahead and trim all the extra material away. And some of these pieces are long enough that you can actually use them for scraps for some other project. So it's kind of hard to see because I should have put black bobbin in so you could see it. But we want to look for our opening right there. And we're going to notch that. So I'm going to start on this side so that we can do it. So by notch it, I mean you're going to go in at an angle like this. And I'm going to do it on both sides of that opening. And I'm going to leave that seam allowance wider. Now I can turn over and go to the front where it's dark thread and I can see better. And I'm going to cut, I like to do somewhere between 1/4 of an inch and 1/8 of an inch. It's closer to 1/4 of an inch if you're a quilter, a scant 1/4 inch. So I'm just going to trim all the way around. And don't worry about those corners because we're going to go ahead and notch those corners. And when you have rounded corners, the notching really, really helps. So can you guys see what I'm doing here? I mean, it's not rocket science, so I don't know how aggressive I should be about letting you see the video here. And before I turn this, I'm going to take it over right behind me and reinforce those zippers. Because if you don't do that, it's a good place for it to stress and tear. And I'm going to go right through that zipper tape. Okay, come around here. And for right now, just go ahead and stick with your 1/4 inch. We're going to go ahead and trim that up a little bit better in a minute. Hope you can see this well. It's hard for me to see behind me and make sure I can show you guys while I'm doing it. One of these days, I will get a better setup. And because I didn't have that basting stitch in here, my seam tape, I couldn't make sure my zip, oops, I almost cut into it. Darn it. Don't do that. See what I did? I cut into my notch. That's okay. So we don't need our exterior fabrics, which includes our pocket, to be in the notch. We only need our lining. So you can go ahead and turn that over and trim that to the same allowance. Do you see what I did? I pulled the lining out and I pulled that away. And I did muck it up, so that's okay. And then you can trim this down to the same. And let me switch away from you for 1 second and add a little bit of reinforcement to my zipper. And you won't need to worry about this because your file will have those basting stitches in it. I don't know how I managed to pull the wrong file. Okay, now, because this is a key fob tab, we want to make sure that we can get a sharp turn on this key fob, a sharp turn right there. So come in here at a 45-degree angle and do a little snip. Come on this side at a 45-degree angle and do a little snip. Do not cut into the threads. You will be very, very sad if you do that. But do you see how that makes a little notch there? Now we're going to repeat on this side. Come in at a 45-degree angle and then repeat from the other side. Don't cut into your threads. And you kind of have to, you might have to finagle it a little bit to get it out. Okay, now we want to cut this little trim off. Don't cut the thread, the corner thread. Just notch across there. Same on this side. Notch across there. And now on these little corners here, we're going to put tiny little notches, very tiny. Do not cut into your thread. Crisscross, applesauce. 1. And you can do like 3 or 4 of them is usually enough. I'm going to do 3. I'm going to show you one more and then I'm going to do it off camera because trying to hold this up here for you to see it is hard. Okay, one more time. So one little notch. Little triangle. And what this does is it reduces some of that fabric. Now, sometimes people just put a little cut in there, but because of the type of curve this is, that just makes the fabric fold over on itself and it still has bulk in there. By cutting these little notches out, it allows that fabric to separate and fold over and it's not over itself. Okay, I'm going to do the rest off camera. So again, this one requires about 3 notches is fine. Alternatively, you can use pinking scissors and do your whole seam allowance with the pinking scissors. If you use those, you don't need to do this notching. And if you did your seam allowance too much, like I did down here in this corner, you don't really need the notching either. I don't like having that narrow of a seam allowance. I just really don't like it. Okay, now we're going to reach inside here. And we're going to pull from the farthest corner, and we're going to turn it inside out. And because we had our zipper open, we're going to do 2 turns really. So you're going to turn inside out once, and that's going to bring the lining to the outside. And this isn't turning really easily because I am using cottons. If you were using vinyls, it's going to be a little bit harder to turn. But just be patient and you'll do it. Okay, you see that? Now go ahead and reach inside with your fingers and push your corners out. You're not done. You're just going to, a small amount right now. We're going to go in and make them fine tune it once we flip it the other way. Okay, now, if you come in here and you get your scissors or seam ripper, if you try and get in here at this first, very carefully, don't cut your zipper. If you try and get the center stitch line out, I don't have my seam ripper handy. It would be easier with the seam ripper. Oh, I had those little, remember I bought these hemostats. Should have used those to turn it. Okay, anyway, you get in there and you get that zipper and you pull that string out. It'll actually come across and tear across the entire zipper. And of course I missed it. But if you can grab that middle placement line, it'll tear away the whole stabilizer and make it easier. I missed it though, so I'm just going to do this the hard way. Oh, no, I got it. I did it off camera, I'm sorry. But there, it pulls the whole thing out. So pull out all the stabilizer. Because this is a lined one, you want to get as much of the stabilizer out as you can. You didn't go through all that trouble to put a lining in it to look inside and see the stabilizer. Okay, now go ahead and reach inside and finish opening up your zipper. Alright, and I'm going to pull this tape out. Now, we're going to turn it one more time. And now this time, because we have that pocket in there, make sure you're pulling the pocket to the outside so it's in the back. Okay, just push, push, push. You know, I'm not in the camera all the time for you, I'm sorry, but I think most of you guys know how to do this. Okay. I'm going to see if we cut our face off. I don't think we did. Okay, so now I got the first round of it. Okay, so now what I want to do is I'm going to get my tweezers, or I have these hemostats. Anything that's got a blunt end to it, and go inside with the lining. So reach inside where your opening is in your lining. I've lost mine already. Oh, my battery is dying on my laptop. Good thing we're almost done. Okay, so there it is. Reach inside there and use your blunt instrument to get poke your corners out. And remember, they're rounded, so don't expect points. I'm not a big fan of pointy corners because they tend to look like dog ears, especially in the hoop projects, and they just don't look as good in my opinion. So, and I'm going to go off camera for a minute here, just because it's kind of hard to get this in the camera. But when I get up to the tab, I'm going to show you. And this is actually being a little bit more difficult since I added that pocket. So it's extra thick. Okay, come up here and do your upper above your zipper. And usually you can actually get your fingers in there and do it good enough. See that? And see that? Usually your fingers are good enough to get those top corners. Now this is where you want to get a sharp point. So push that tab out. And you want as sharp of a tab. See that? You don't want that. That's going to show inside your key fob. Get inside with your hemostats or whatever you have and try and get that squared up as much as you can. If you have to go inside the lining again, do that. But see, now I got that corner, and now over here. And because we did that extra snip into the angle, into the corners, it allows that to come open. And just work it. All right, you can see I'm getting it. And there's still a little bit more. I'm going to go ahead and get inside the lining because it's not up to my standard. I want it a little bit more pointy. So I'm sorry I'm off camera because I'm trying to get into this lining here. Okay, I'm inside the lining now. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to push up just a little bit more. Very carefully. But we want to get that tab as squared as we can. See how much better that was? Because I went in through the lining. There we go. Now see how, oh, I got out and it's not good enough over there. Oh, no. Get back in there. I thought it was good. It's not, it's still curved. I'm going to get over there just a little bit more. All right, there we go. Now, you see that? That is a nice tab. Now you're going to go ahead and press it. If you're using cloth, you can go ahead and roll, whether you're using cloth or lino, you roll the edges together. And then since mine is cloth, I would go ahead and use my iron and press this. And then turn it inside out one more time, just so you can close that opening. Now you can hand sew it, or you can, can't really machine sew it because you don't want to go through your exterior. But you can hand sew it or glue baste it closed, or well, my favorite trick, I use double stick tape, permanent double stick tape. It holds up really well, and I'm off camera a second, I'm sorry. I'm just pushing this a little bit more. Holds up really well, and it's easy to do. So close my zipper, and I'm not putting the key fob on it right now. You guys, I have another video to show you that demonstrates how to do that, and you guys can do that on your own. But there you go, cute little one. Now this one, you might be able to shove a big phone in it, but it's geared towards the smaller phones. It's geared towards the regulars and not the pluses. And it'll fill the phone up, and you might have just enough room for a chapstick or something like that. And then you can hang it from your belt. All right, guys. I hope y'all enjoyed this one, isn't it? Oh, it ended up working out perfect, didn't it? And I got lucky on that one. All right, guys. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.